The Olympics have become the premier global sporting event, featuring athletes from every country in the world, competing for the top spot in their sport. When the first modern games were held in Athens in 1896, 1500 years after the original Olympics had been held for the last time, banned along with all other pagan festivals by the Christian Emperor Theodosius I, there were only 280 participants from 13 nations. Now there are over 14,000. The exact date for the origin of the Olympics was traditionally set at 776 BC, and the ancient Greeks began to count years by the Olympics, with 776 being year 1. However, it is likely that the games predate even this. Some believe the event was created by Pelops, for whom the Peloponnese was named. One popular tale ascribed their creation to Heracles, who lived before the Trojan War and thus well before 776 BC. Some said the site was where Zeus wrestled with Kronos for control of the cosmos. A hill named for Kronos stands overlooking the site. Apollo is said to have won the first Olympics, defeating Ares in boxing and Hermes in running. The patron gods of the games were Hermes, Heracles, and the Dioscuri. But the competition itself was held in honor of the loud thundering son of Kronos, celebrating his defeat of his father and his rule as king of the gods. Despite the identical origin of the name, the ancient Olympic Games were not held anywhere near Mount Olympus, but far to the southwest in the Peloponnese, near the river Alpheus, in the ancient region of Elis. The exact meaning of the word is unknown, but it often appears to be used as a synonym for Uranos or heaven. Mount Olympus was also known as Belos, where Homer says in the Iliad, Belos thespesios, meaning divine threshold. The sanctuary of Olympia is bordered by the Cledeus River, which flows down to the Alpheus and marks the western boundary of the sanctuary, while the much larger Alpheus forms the boundary to the south. When it was an Olympic year, heralds would be dispatched from Elis all over the Greek world, including to far-off destinations in Gaul, Spain, and along the Black Sea in modern Russia. The Olympics were pan-Hellenic. Greeks, and only Greeks, were allowed to participate, although later the rules were bent to allow Romans to also enter. An Olympic truce would be called for, guaranteeing the safe passage for all competitors coming to the Games, which may have required them to pass through hostile territory. This was possible only because of the sacred nature of the competition. Within the sanctuary was a stadium, hippodrome, a palestra for wrestling and boxing, the Leonidion, where athletes slept and ate. But unlike the modern Olympics, this was all in the shadow of two temples, one dedicated to Hera, where the Olympic flame is lit today for the modern games, and a larger temple dedicated to Zeus. The smaller temple, later dedicated to Hera alone, is the older temple, and likely was originally dedicated to Zeus, or both Zeus and Hera originally, before the grander temple to Zeus was constructed. It was the largest temple in Greece until the construction of the Parthenon in Athens. Within was housed a colossal statue of Zeus, made of ivory and gold panels, said to be larger than all other statues save the Colossus of Rhodes and of Rome. In other words, the thing was massive, 12.4 meters high, made in 435 BC. Unfortunately, it was destroyed sometime after the banning of paganism. Nevertheless, there would hardly have been a moment when the athletes competing in the games would not have seen visible signs that the competition was religious in nature. While there's some disagreement as to when exactly during the year the tournament was held, it was likely held sometime in August. It lasted several days and was opened with solemn rites and sacrifices to Olympian Zeus. Unlike some other annual tournaments in Greece, only men were allowed to compete in the Olympic Games, save for chariot racing, where women were allowed to enter their chariot teams, which were then driven by male slaves or servants on their behalf. There were rules against women entering the sanctuary after the games had begun, though female victors had statues dedicated to them within the sanctuary. There was also reportedly rules around competitors' sexual conduct, which was to be restricted during the competition. This abstinence was related to ritual purity, and the competition itself was in fact a ritual act, a performance dedicated to the gods. As the Olympics pits competitors, it also has competing myths, including Heracles versus Heracles? Yes, there were reportedly two different Heracles. One Heracles is the one that we all know and are familiar with, the one of the 12 labors, son of Zeus. The other was the leader of the Dactyli, daimon spirits of Mount Ida, who helped to guard and raise up the infant Zeus, hiding his cries with their loud noise as they clashed about with their shields and spears. They invented the race in which competitors wore a helmet and shield while they ran. Too bad that one isn't still around. They are believed to be identical to the Curetes, and in some way relate to the fingers of the hand, with one of the meanings of dactyli being fingers. The dactyl Heracles has 4 brothers: Aeneas, forefinger; Epimedes, middle finger; Iasus, ring finger; and Idas, little finger, Heracles being the thumb. Pausanias records a legend that said during the rule of Kronos, the men of the golden race built a temple to the god at Olympia. Zeus wrestled with his father there, and Heracles and his brothers ran a race against each other in honor of Zeus, crowning the winner with olive branches, which he introduced into Greece from Hyperborea. They held the games on every 5th year, counting inclusively, for there were 5 brothers. It could be that this dactyl Heracles and the Heracles who is the son of Zeus were in some ancient past the same figure, although eventually becoming seen as distinct. For it was also said that Heracles, son of Zeus, founded the games in honor of his father. However, by far, the most widespread and popular myth associated with the site had to do with the story of Pelops, an ancient ancestral figure of the Peloponnese for which the peninsula was said to be named. Pelops was the son of Tantalus, the king of Lydia, an ancient kingdom in Asia Minor. Indo-Europeans from the Anatolian language family related to Hittite. In some accounts, after having been murdered as a human sacrifice by his own father, he was resurrected by the gods. Some say he was even then brought up to Olympus by Poseidon, but later cast out by Zeus. Pelops, coming to the region of Olympia, seeks to wed the daughter of King Oenomaus, ruler of Pisa, the nearest ancient settlement to the Olympian sanctuary, only 2.5 kilometers to the east. But Oenomaus was less than excited about the prospect, for it was prophesied that his son-in-law would kill him. He had already killed 18 other suitors. To those who sought to wed his daughter, he would offer them a race. They on their chariot with his daughter, and he would pursue. If they won, they lived. If they lost, then the suitor's head would be mounted on one of the wooden columns that supported the king's house. Pelops was granted a magical horse team by Poseidon, but even still the young man feared the dreadful Oenomaus, who was the son of Ares and who never lost a race. Some say that Pelops then went in secret to the charioteer of Oenomaus, Myrtilus, son of Hermes, the greatest driver of horses, to request his aid in the race. In exchange for ensuring the loss of Oenomaus, Myrtilus would win one night with Hippodamia, whom he loved dearly. Others say it was Hippodamia herself who went to the love-struck charioteer in secret without telling Pelops. Myrtilus readily agreed, and either ensured that Oenomaus lost through his crafty control of the chariot, or by replacing the wheel pin with one made of wax. The wheel came off, and Oenomaus fell to his death. Yet, when Myrtilus came to seek his reward, the longed-for love of Hippodamia, Pelops lifted him up and cast him over a cliff into the sea, which was then named after the drowned son of Hermes. But as Myrtilus fell, he called down a dreadful curse upon Pelops, the breaker of contracts, and though he won great rule over the Peloponnese, his family suffered great hardships, and the land was said to be savaged by drought for a long time. Desperate to avoid the curse, Pelops built a temple to Hermes, and made an honored mound for Myrtilus, which stood near the Olympic hippodrome. The mound was feared by all those who raced at the Olympics, for it was haunted by the ghosts of Myrtilus. Right as the horses neared the bend in the track, he would occasionally make his appearance, startling the horses out of their wits, sending them careening madly, causing horrific crashes that injured and even killed competitors, not unlike the crash which Myrtilus inflicted upon Oenomaus. To avoid this dreaded curse, competitors would make sacrifices and prayers to Myrtilus, attempting to gain his favor and avoid the sudden madness which would come upon their horses. Nearby was the tomb of Pelops, the Pelopion. He was greatly honored above all other heroes at Olympia. Sacrifices of black rams were made by night to him. His mound was composed of burnt ash and compacted earth, and was of a very ancient origin. To make the sacrifices upon the top of the mound once a year, stairs would be cut into the side of the ashen mound by a priest. Of all the ancient myths surrounding the Olympics, it is Pelops who is the most closely connected to the site. His tale can in ways be seen as linking to the myths of the games, especially the chariot race. It's possible that the games themselves began as part of a cult to this ancestral figure, his funeral games. In the Iliad, great games were held for the funeral of Patroclus, and a large mound erected partly out of the remains of the great funeral pyre, meaning that it was comprised of ash and soil, just like the mound of Pelops. The funeral custom in the Iliad is very archaic. After the burial of the remains in a golden urn, along with burned offerings and slaves, games were held in his honor, where prizes were awarded. Although unlike the Olympics, the second-place contestant also won a prize. In Gaelic myth from Ireland, the god Lugh also held funeral games around the start of August on behalf of his foster mother, a goddess of the land who died due to her labors. Or in other traditions, the funeral was for his wives. Great games were also held in which horse racing was central, along with other athletic and martial competitions, and so there would seem to be some common origin relating these types of competitive games to funerals that goes far back into the mist of prehistory. The tournament at Olympia may have evolved out of the hero worship of a real Pelops, beginning with a funeral and games similar to that described in the Iliad, and likely originating well before the construction of any temples or tracks on the site. According to some, the site was as old as Zeus himself. Some legends said that the tournament had been long forgotten before it was revived again by Pelops. It was likewise forgotten from the close of the 4th century AD to 1896. Now the games are played all over the world, bringing great fame to those whom fleeting victory lands upon as she descends from the hand of Zeus, and the scales of Hermes tip ponderously between the competitors as the souls are weighed and the fates allotted. To many an athlete he grants great success, but to many more he deals out ruin, which can bring tears to the cheeks and anguish to the heart. And so these games that have become famous all over the world began as a religious festival dedicated to Olympian Zeus. And the name the Olympics is directly related to an epithet for Zeus, the holy mountain, and very likely heaven itself. I hope you found this interesting. Best of luck to all the Olympic athletes. And as always, stand tall.